Tēnā koutou, nau mai ki te Pītau Pūmanawa. The Grants Subcommittee, we are quorate with our vast body of 4 members. You can see are laid along the table before you, so we'll kick off. Please join me in a karakia if you wish. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hi ake ana te atākura, he tio, he huka, he hauhunga, ti hai, mauri ora. All right. I have one apology for lateness, and that will be from Councillor Young. She will be approximately 10 minutes late.
I have an apology, Mayor Whānau.
Okay, and one apology for absence from Mayor Whānau. So I would like to move that we accept those apologies. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor O'Neill. My left peripheral is better than my right. Let's put it to a vote. Yes. Great, I declare the motion carries. I now call on members to declare any conflicts of interest with any of the material on the agenda today. Abby? Great. I move that the minutes of the previous meeting of the subcommittee be approved. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Deputy Mayor Foon. Let's put that to a vote. Kua mana. 1.5, there are no items not on the agenda. Therefore, it is time to move to 1.6, which is public participation. There are 3 public participants who have requested to speak: Danny Webster, Sharon Lehney, and Liam Wright, excusing pronunciation. First up, we have Danny Webster speaking on behalf of Etu Musicians Union regarding the Arts and Culture Review. Nau mai haramai, Danny, you have 10 minutes. Please begin either at the podium or the table when you're ready.
Kia ora koutou, ko Danny aho. I'm here on behalf of Etu Musicians Union. That's amazing. We're a union that represents independent and professional musicians, composers, songwriters all across the motu, and with a pretty strong contingent here in Pōneke. So I'm here today to speak to the Living Wage for Events Fund in support of retaining that. Sorry I don't have a song for you today, but we only had a couple of days' notice to pull this together. And I do understand there is a motion to table and play, but thought we'd speak to it anyway since it's currently topical. So there's 3 kind of key things I wanted to cover off. The first being the Living Wage for Events Fund is $300,000 that goes to support events in Pōneke, including a whole lot of things that form a really critical part of our creative infrastructure, if you like, and that goes on to support the performers who make those events happen. This includes things like Great Sounds Great, Newtown Festival, Wellington Jazz Festival, Fringe, and a whole range of other events that Wellingtonians really value. So to see this funding end would make it a lot harder for people to put those events on, and it's likely the performers would be the ones who would actually take the hit. Second thing is there's real value in having a dedicated Living Wage for Events fund because it sends a really strong signal to the sector that there is an expectation that, first of all, council values performers and they expect events that they support to do the same. Unfortunately, society at large in 2025 too often still doesn't recognise performance as work. If you talk to any performer, we will have countless stories of times when we have been asked to perform for free, for exposure, for a couple of beers, for a $25 supermarket voucher. I'm thinking of a time just a couple of months ago when, after playing a gig, someone came up to me and said, "Oh, we'd love your band to come play at our wedding down in the South Island." And when I said, "How much would you be looking to pay for that?" they said, "Oh, well, we probably couldn't cover your flights, we probably couldn't cover your accommodation, but there'll be some free drinks at the bar." And I was just imagining them trying to have that conversation with the florist or the caterer or the venue manager. It's ridiculous, right? And it is ridiculous. it's not malicious, but unfortunately, as artists, we do often sell ourselves short as well because we internalise those experiences of being undervalued. We love what we do and we like helping our mates. So that's where things like the Living Wage for Events Fund are really important. It sets a really clear expectation that if council's going to support you, you're going to value your performers. The current living wage is $27.80 per hour, so let's be clear, that's not a lot. I don't think any of us would be over the moon if we were offered $27.80 to do an hour set. We'd make more than that busking, to be frank. So this is not an exorbitant baseline to ask for, but the truth is the music community, as no doubt other arts communities, there is a lot of unpaid labour. There's a lot of favours for friends. There's a lot of under-the-table stuff that happens. And so we're thinking about, well, what happens when someone wants to emerge from that underground and start putting on a larger scale public event and seek funding for that? That's where having that expectation set and that ability to access support to meet that expectation is really valuable, because that helps avoid a situation where those kind of loosey-goosey practices continue at scale, and then that becomes exploitation, and then that infects the wider music industry as a whole and contributes towards that wider environment of devaluing art and artists. And just a little note, finally, on how we came to be speaking to you today. So we actually had a meeting with council officers about a month ago, which was really constructive. We were told that they had reservations about the Living Wage for Events Fund and that we would have an opportunity to give feedback through democratic processes. Our understanding had been that this would be part of the wider grants review, and so it's a little bit surprising that this has come up as essentially a done deal in a subcommittee paper. It kind of sucks. It's not great. It's not really how democratic processes are supposed to work. We think that Wellington deserves better. We think that artists deserve better from those who are working to support artists, and we think that you as councillors deserve better from your officers. So we hope that you'll take that feedback on board and pass that on as appropriate. In conclusion, please keep the fund. We think it's great. We'd be more than happy to be part of a conversation about how it can be improved and better supported going forwards, and that should happen through the proper democratic processes. Cool. That's it. Any questions?
Thank you. We have one question from Councillor O'Neill.
Ngā mihi, Danny. From the perspective of somebody applying for a grant, do you think it's important to have a separate living wage grant to apply for top-ups from, or could that maybe be one of the things we consider when we're looking at all the grants that apply for the Arts and Culture Fund, like a condition or a separate one?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we can only give feedback on what's in front of us at the moment. That being said, I do think that there is merit in having that separate fund, because if it's sort of buried, if living wage expectations are buried in a criteria, sort of it gets a little bit diluted, and I'm not sure that that sends as strong a signal. But, you know, obviously, if there is a view towards reviewing or changing how the fund is operating going forwards, happy to be part of that conversation, yeah.
Cool.
Thank you. Any further questions? No. Ko miti ngā pātai. Thank you very much, Jenny
Thank
Webster. Our next public participant will be Sharon Leheny, excusing pronunciation, speaking on behalf of the Queen's Closet on the topic of the Arts and Culture Review. Nau mai haramai. Ki te pita kōrero, please feel free to use the podium or at the table just in front of you. You have 10 minutes.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today. Yes, I'm Sharon Leheny, and some of you might remember that I'm one of the co-founders of the Queen's Closet, which is a unique period instrument baroque orchestra based here in Pōneke. And I would just like to speak to you very briefly today in support and appreciation of a couple of the proposals that are on the table, I understand, regarding the Arts and Culture Fund. So the first one of these is the proposed additional allocation of $600,000 to the Arts and Culture Fund. We really just want to convey how much we appreciate this proposal. We see it as a very real and meaningful demonstration of the City Council's recognition of the pressure that arts organisations are under, and also of your commitment to the arts. So thank you for that proposal. And the second that we want to speak in support of is the proposal to create the new annual stability fund for those who are making a regular contribution to Poneke's art scene. So we really appreciate that you've obviously really clearly heard the voices of organizations like ours who can find ourselves struggling to plan and deliver annual seasons of work and asking for a pathway out of project funding. And so I really don't think I can overstate the value of this proposed new fund and the positive impacts that it could have for organizations like ours. And so I just want to convey our strong support for this proposal. And just to say, Poneke is just, as far as we can see, it's an amazing place to be creative, and we feel so lucky to be here. Thank you. That was all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? One from Councillor O'Neill.
Ngā mihi. I was just wondering if you had any feedback about how, when we roll this plan out, how to communicate with people who receive grants like yourself or others about the kind of regular contributions or any changes we've made. Did you have any suggestions?
I don't know. Our organisation has always been fairly proactive and just kind of nosing around and annoying people to find out what's around. And I suspect that not everybody is. So, yeah, I think it probably to make sure that you're finding everybody, it might be worth you just looking at who you think might be eligible and contacting them, because when I talk to other people about the City Council funding, nobody really knows that much about it, and they don't really keep an eye on agendas and that sort of thing and progress. So yeah, I think to get the value, you might need to be proactive about reaching those people.
Okay, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Up next, we have Liam Wright speaking on behalf of the Living Wage Movement Wellington on the topic of the Arts and Culture Review, accompanied by Mr. Caldwell, it would seem, as ever. No, mai haramai, you have 10 minutes.
Oh, there we go. Kia ora koutou katoa. My name is Liam Wright. I am part of the community stream of the Living Wage Movement and the organisation Working Students Wellington. I'm also a member of the Living Wage Movement Wellington Steering Group. We are responsible for administrating our movement on behalf of the 30-member organisations from faith, union and community groups. I wish to express the movement's opposition to the council potentially reneging on its commitment to championing the living wage via cuts to the Living Wage Events Fund. As both a student and a worker at one of our recreation centres, I can tell you firsthand that the council's ongoing commitment to the living wage has supported us through study as workers, as well as other cost of living pressures that have affected those on modest wages. One has to be grateful not to find the value of one's work falling behind the cost of living like other workers in our city have. With below inflation minimum wage increases, the impact of undermining this fund will be a sizable real-term pay cut for workers, and more, as well as the significant staff turnover for businesses that those accessing this council fund rely on. The fund was established in 2021 to recognise the contribution many frontline staff make over the last 2 pandemic-plagued years. At the time, the council sought to champion the living wage, both within its own dealings, and the Living Wage Events Fund showcased an appreciation for workers while Wellingtonians enjoyed the arts the city offers. Knowing that the workers were all being paid fairly, the announcement article shows Councillor Matthews at the time regarded the fund as a way for councillors to make good on their commitment to make Wellington a living wage capital. Looking at past allocations, we estimate that between October 2022 and October 2024, 17 out of 50, that is 34% of the grants that were allocated, were for for-profit entities. That means 66% of the recipients were charities, trusts and other not-for-profit organisations. Of the total $352,000 spent, only $93,000 went to organisations that were not charities or trusts. This means 74% of the allocated funds went towards non-profit organisations. Contrary to some dissenting views that the fund was corporate welfare for employers, this fund aids in supporting communities and cultural groups with the means to pay the living wage rate to those whose work is vital in the running of these organisations' events. From the perspective of an anonymous employer, in discussion they mentioned that should the fund no longer be available, staff would still expect to earn a living wage in some cases, necessitating cuts to services or redundancy / no longer hiring people to fill these roles. From the workers' perspective, having their pay topped up during these events is a much-needed boost for many. As mentioned, minimum wage workers face real-term pay cuts, falling further behind livable wages. Many working households in our city report facing material hardship and go without the necessities. Even if these jobs are for one-off events and only supplement people's usual incomes, if their typical income is inadequate as the city deals with its cost of living crisis, then the Living Wage Events Fund plays a vital role in providing relief, even if it's only temporary. Having expressed the perspective of employers as well as workers in the sector, arts funding will effectively be cut $300,000 without this Living Wage Fund, all while simultaneously sending a message to the arts community that it is prepared to run events on wages which it has already acknowledged are not enough to live on. Removing this fund will lead to a contraction within the local arts economy. Lastly, we support the motion to give the community and stakeholders more time to contribute to this decision. We believe that once the Council hears from a cross-section of the community on this issue, not continuing the Living Wage Fund will be untenable for Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? No. Thank you very much for coming in.
There we go. Cheers.
All right, that concludes public participation. We move now to general business. We'll begin with item 2.1, the Social and Recreation Fund Safe City and Wellbeing March 2025, to be introduced by David Ensor, Sahai Ogad, Mark Farrar, and Sean Linton. Or some combination thereof. Okay. That's all right.
Kia ora. Sorry for that confusion. We are recommending funding for the Pacifica Patrol group. They are one of 3 community patrol groups that we will come in time to recommend funding for, including the ethnic patrollers and the Māori wardens. Thank you, Sahai. All good. This is one of the key actions in the City Safety Plan that was approved very recently, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, are there any? One from Councillor O'Neill.
Kia ora tātou. The point around other ethnic patrols, I just wanted to understand if there's been further thinking on that, if we're giving some money to Pacifica Police. Yeah, what would that look like?
We're intending to come initially with a very similar proposal for the ethnic patrollers, and we're working separately with the Māori wardens to recognise the unique role that the Māori wardens play. The ethnic patrollers at the moment are not a legal entity, and that has been the hold-up around recommending funding for them, but there is work ongoing.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Foon.
Morena. Just wanting to understand reviewing processes. So this is a one-off or an annual fund, and just how will we review, tighten it, make it better over time?
Yeah, so this is part of the that initial $500,000 fund for city safety. So it makes up that package. And we'll review it every year. But I guess in the first, once we deploy, once everything's up and running, we'll be getting information and data to review what kind of impact they're making. The key thing is that they are part of that central coordination between all patrols, our service on the ground, our CCTV cameras and police. And we'll be reviewing how we tighten that up from a coordination perspective, the impact that we make and the coverage that we get to have from a city safety perspective overall.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
One question from Councillor Young.
So thank you. So if they're not a legal entity, what can they do?
The Pacifica Patrollers are a legal entity.
Oh, I thought you said that there was
The ethnic patrollers are in the process of establishing their entity.
Okay. He Pītau anō? Nope. All right. Thanks very much. Sorry, I'm just looking at the motion. Okay. Would anyone like to move the motion recommended before us? Maybe. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. To be moved by Councillor O'Neill. Would you like to speak?
Just to speak really briefly and to call out to the mahi of the Safety and Wellbeing Plan, it's really exciting to see grants like this come through. And yeah, it's just really neat, and to thank all the officers that have been working on this. I know at the safety plan the other day, it was quite a busy day, so might not have had the time to recognise the amount of mahi that's gone in, but this is really awesome.
Deputy Mayor Finn?
Kia ora. Yes, I would like to back Councillor O'Neill. In fact, I think that day this total plan needed to be enshrined in glory. So it's just nice to just have a little quieter moment today, even though we're approving a very small part of it, but it is a really important part. And I can tell you that a couple of years ago, a Pacifica friend said to me, why don't you get the mum and dads, get them out on the street as a patrol? And now I can ring him and say, guess what, we're just signing off. So hopefully that's what we'll do today. But yeah, so even I guess the feedback from within the community is there are solutions from within each community that they can bring. So I was most overjoyed to see this as being part of the bigger solution. Kia ora.
Thank you. Any further debate? None. All right, let's move to the vote. Motion carried. We now move to item 2.2, the Arts and Culture Fund, Wellington Opera Trust, March 25, to be introduced by Gisela Carr and Mark Farah. And company.
Kia ora, councillors. Wellington Opera is a deeply committed group of trustees and creatives who have been mounting opera productions in the Wellington region for 4 years, and council has supported them at that time around the level that is being suggested in the paper. It's difficult for a regional or local opera company to, it's a very expensive art form, but they have made it possible through unrelenting and heroic efforts in terms of fundraising. And they've been very successful at that. So they're completely committed, I think for two reasons. One is they want to give audiences in Wellington the opportunity to experience a range of operas. And secondly, we're a city that's very strong in music and singers, and they want to give those singers opportunities. So the council's interest here lies both in the fact that they are part of the annual calendar that gives Wellingtonians a chance to experience lots of range of arts forms, and secondly, the employment opportunities they offer the creative sector are of interest to us. It's come to you out of cycle, as you know, because they have to make a decision this month about whether they will proceed with their program. They're presenting 2 operas this year, one of which is a premiere of a Māori work by Dame Gillian Whitehead. The other is a Masked Ball, a classic piece of the opera repertoire. And in order for the board to proceed and finalise their fundraising strategy, they need to know that we are in. So we are proposing to you that, given this sits within the level of support we've been giving them for the last 4 years, that it's not an it's not an unusual or untoward request, and that we would recommend that you support it out of cycle so that they can make a decision as a board, knowing that we're there, what they will then do with the rest of their fundraising gap.
Thank you. We'll move to questions. I have one. Are we certain that our funding will allow them to continue? Are we the last thing they have to sort out?
No, the advice they've given us, I won't go into financial details on a company in this forum, but the advice they've given us is that they're very close to their target, and our support at the level proposed is an important piece of it. But they're not, on the information they've given us, far short once we confirm. And as I say, we've supported them at this level in previous years, so it's a reasonable expectation of theirs.
I suppose what I'm really asking is whether there is a scenario where we do grant this funding and they are still not able to proceed, if that's a possibility.
Understood. Well, as I understand it, the board themselves will make that decision. I mean, our funding is not the make or break for Wellington Opera.
Yeah.
The board will make that decision. Their trustees have supported the company. They've had very profitable seasons, very successful seasons. They've had some seasons that have not been so profitable. And over the course of 4 years, their trustees have stood with the company and made it work. So we are not the big determinant of this. It's up to the board who'll be taking the risk in late March. But of course, as we have in previous years, we have caveats in our contracts with them that they need to be able to show that they've closed the gap and that they can proceed. But the board will want to do that anyway. I mean, that's, as the board takes the risk, that will be a consideration for them. Yep.
Thank you. One question from Councillor Young.
So I think in previous years the board have personally underwritten the opera. Are they doing that this year as well?
I don't have information on that, Councillor Young. Yep.
Any further questions? No? All right. Thank you very much.
Great pleasure in moving this. It will be a fantastic opera. I don't know if any of you went to see Tosca last year, but people who really know opera, which doesn't include me, reckoned it was better than the production in Sydney. So they do fantastic work and use a lot of local talent, including the director, most of the artists and the crew behind it. So I think it's fantastic, especially as our School of Music has for years produced amazing opera singers, which again doesn't include me. So, you know, I have great pleasure in moving this paper.
Fantastic. I will second this paper, and I will speak just to say that the service that the opera provides to young artists who are fresh out of music school, having a place to land, catch their breath after a heady few years up at the NZSM, and then begin on their wider journey. I know plenty of my cohort, when I went through the School of Music, did go to the company, spend some time there before heading off to do advanced degrees overseas or to join opera companies in Europe or the United States, or indeed in Asia. And I think the way that we foster our local young people after their training and at the very start of their musical careers, right when they need a bit of structure, they've just lost the ivory tower and they need someplace to go, and also the training that is provided there and the experience they gain is invaluable to this city. Given the out-of-cycle nature of this funding request, but taking into consideration the consistency of this grant in what has been granted before, I'm very confident that this is a good decision for the subcommittee to make. Kia ora. Anybody else? No? All right, let's move to the vote. Fantastic. Kua mana. All right. We will now move to item 2.3, the Social and Recreation Fund Criteria and Framework Review, to be presented by David Ensor, Mark Farrar and Sean Linton, or some combination thereof.
Kia ora anō. Really thrilled to be bringing the Social and Recreation Fund framework to you for consideration and approval. This follows the briefing that we had last month. I think probably what we really want to highlight with the framework is that what we're attempting to do is really strengthen the council's role as a funder in achieving community outcomes and highlighting the areas where the long-term plan has identified as being priorities for the council and where we think that funding can have the greatest impact. We have developed a communication and a transition plan with organisations who have received funding from us for some time, and we're really committed to continuing to work with organisations who might be impacted by these changes to make any adjustments that they might need, as well as for us to work internally and with these organisations to make sure that we're really clear on the impact that that funding is having, as well as setting up an ongoing conversation and framework and process to be able to evolve the fund with the needs of the city and with the social priorities of the city, rather than the current place that we're at where we roll over funding without giving consideration to whether it is the most appropriate use of the money that we have available. We're very happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. I understand there's been a fairly robust Q&A process, and I ask that that now be tabled. Any further questions? Councillor O'Neill.
Kia ora. Thank you for the really thorough Q&A. It was really neat to have that there. My question is just around for community centres specifically, how will the funding levels be protected to ensure like a smooth kind of consistent level of service, I guess, if there are any changes in there?
The framework that we've proposed allows us to consider the impacts of the current review of the community centre model that is underway as part of Te Awe Māpara. At the moment, that review is due to be finished by April, and then we will take some time to consider the implications of that. We expect some of those changes to be things like providing a really clear and consistent funding framework for community centres in addition to the framework, so that things are fair and equitable and everybody understands why those funding decisions are made. The framework allows us to incorporate the findings and the decisions made as part of that review into ongoing funding decisions, and they would likely apply from the 26-27 financial year after the transition period that we're going through applies.
Hi, cool, thank you. Just a second part, I can see throughout the paper that transparency is kind of a really key thing that the new framework is trying to focus on. How can the grants process be more transparent either to like members of the public who want to check out what kind of levels of service we've got going on, or is there a way for applicants to see a new level of transparency on our public website?
Yes, what we want to do is set up applicants for funding to succeed, right, and to be really clear around what we're funding, why we're funding it, and how we make those decisions. So we have developed operationally an assessment kind of framework that we will go through that will show how we reach the decision from application to a recommendation to the subcommittee for approval, and we will publish all of that information on the website as well, so that people can see really clearly how we reach the decisions that we do.
Fabulous. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, kia ora. Just the te anamata akai o tātou taone, when in that beautiful little graph you drew, it was like there was a lot of very little multi-year funding, but lots of little ongoing projects. Is that something that will be refined under the model that you're proposing?
Yes, the current grant criteria makes it really difficult for organisations to enter what we call the multi-year club, which is probably not the right way to describe it, but it's really hard for new organisations and new initiatives currently to receive multi-year funding because so much of that pot is already allocated to existing organisations. And so this new framework will allow us to consider other organisations for multi-year funding where they align to the framework and where the service that they're delivering achieves those strategic priorities, and where it makes sense for a community organisation to provide the service rather than for the council to deliver it or support it in a different way.
Okay, cool. Pātai anō. Just in particular, there's one organisation in Newtown called Time Bank, and I know that they came off the multi-year funding and they were very nervous about this change. To me, it looks like they fit the criteria that we're proposing. So is there any change to them specifically, or...?
We haven't as part of the framework and as part of the work identified at an organisation level whether organisations will or won't align with it, but what we intend to do through this one-year transition period is work with all of those organisations to understand how the service that they currently provide aligns to the framework or doesn't, and how they can use data and reporting to demonstrate the impact that they're having. So that this 12-month period really provides an opportunity for organisations like Time Bank and others to really clearly show the impact that the service they provide has and how it aligns to the priorities of the fund.
Okay. And he pātai anō. Just in terms of the new allocation of 55% city safety and wellbeing and 45% to resilience connection, what's the difference between that and what we're currently allocating? Is it more or less the same with the new 500?
It's pretty close. Within a couple of percentage points, it's pretty close.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Young.
So I'm just interested in, I'm slightly interested in Tawa, as it's not my ward. Just interested in the Tawa Community Fund. Is there a sort of time when it finishes? I mean, are we always going to regard them as a special case just because they didn't used to be, they're the most recent addition to Wellington?
There is no time when it finishes. I think we would have to get some separate advice for you, but I think it would relate to things like the next representation review and decisions that are made in the future around local boards and their role.
Okay, thanks.
I have one question just relating to 2.3. How would officers feel about grants that would otherwise be totally delegated to officers just being run past perhaps the chair of the grants subcommittee?
Yes, I think we would be very happy to work with the chair of the committee on how we operationalise the delegation.
Even in terms of a simple kind of sign-off or a heads-up?
Certainly, yeah.
Yep. Okay. I might make a small amendment to this motion in that case, but thank you very much. Okay, no further questions? Great. Okay, we're going to adjourn for 5 minutes. We'll be back at 10:07. Take a rest break as needed. Okay. We now move to the debate on item 2.3, the Sock and Rec Fund. This is to be moved by Councillor O'Neill. Do you wish to speak now?
Kia ora. Yeah, just briefly to thank officers for their work on this. I know hearing out in the community there's been quite a lot of engagement with different people that fall under this fund criteria, and I'm really loving the idea of streamlining the process to make it more accessible for people applying for smaller grants, but also a greater ability for more transparency around it, because when you're an organisation and you have to submit several grant applications, it can get quite muddled in terms of all the different bodies you apply to, so it's really cool to see the council kind of looking to make that a priority in any review. And Deputy Fern will second.
Yeah, great. It might be good to have a discussion maybe offline, but I think just for me it feels like we've got a lot of, there are changes and reviews, and the merging and what will affect another. And so for me, I found it hard to just get that whole view on what we're trying to do. And so while I think this is a simple, and it makes absolute sense to align the grants to our LTP, is just concern in the community, which, you know, comes through about how will that affect other things like our community centres and what have you. So I just would like to give that bit of feedback, but in general, any streamlining, more transparency, making it clearer for people is good. Kia ora.
Thank you very much. I will speak now. I broadly support this paper. I just have one minor editorial amendment, which I am now going to raise, and that is just that the chair, as well as the business unit manager, have sign-off on any grants under the value of $5,000. It's a minor change, but we like to do things by amendment. And I understand Pauiwi Hohaia will second this. Great. Do you wish to speak? Okay. In that case, will there be any debate on this amendment? No. Let's put it to a vote. Kua mana. Returning to the substantive, will there be any further debate?
Not really, just to table the Q&A, because I think there was some really good clarity provided in the answers there. Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you for that. I take it that was your right of reply. In that case, let's put it to a vote. That has passed. Okay, in accordance with Standing Order 19.1, I'm going to reorder the agenda. I'm going to move item 2.5, Decision Register Updates and Upcoming Report, forward. We will deal with that now. Following that, we will take a brief morning tea, and I would ask members of the subcommittee only to join me in the room adjoining this one, just for a brief discussion on item 2.4. Thank you. Let's move to 2.5 now. This will be introduced by James Roberts.
Kia ora koutou. I'll take the paper as tabled and read.
Okay. Are there any questions on this paper? No? Okay. I will move that we receive the information. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Young, perhaps? Sorry. Councillor Young it is. Okay. Will there be any debate? There will be none from me. Great. Let's put that to a vote. Kua mana. All right. I'm now going to call a morning tea. Please join me in the room next door. Thank you for your patience, everybody. I hope you all had a pleasant morning too. So, from here we will move to item 2.4, the Arts and Culture Fund Review. Now, the motion that will be presented in debate will differ from the officer's recommendation as demonstrated up there, but first we will have questions of officers. So please welcome Gisellica and Catherine Graham. Excuse me.
Would you like me to make some opening remarks?
Please.
Greetings again, councillors. What you're seeing in front of you is a piece of work you've seen before. It started last year when we wanted to review the framework that covers our existing granting programs, which are around $3 million to the sector, and in anticipation that you having improved an increase for the sector in the LTP, the framework would be useful to you in making the decisions you'll make in May in that regard. We reviewed 7 years of funding in detail. We used an independent assessor. We brought together an expert panel, and in December we road tested these conclusions with you. The conclusions in front of you today in the framework are identical to the ones we road tested with you in December. There's just been a few minor tweaks to wordings. So you see it unchanged today. And in the meantime, of course, we are now in engagement with the 26 or so organisations that receive multi-year funding contracts. And depending on your adoption today of the principles of what's proposed, we will then commence discussion with the new annual stability framework proposed applicants. The changes are actually relatively minor. What we've done to the framework compared to what the Grants Committee's seen in the past, one is to make it coherent. Secondly, to emphasise the strategy of why we fund. So in one sense, under Ahotune 2030, we're funding the strategic leadership of large cultural organisations in the city, and those are the multi-years. But the major change is to lift out of the project funding a group of people who, through the analysis, we identified as not true project applicants. They are, in fact, people doing annual work year on year who keep coming back to us sometimes more than once in a term. You've seen grants, you all know this grant pattern because you're the Grants Committee. And what we're proposing there, these people are wonderful partners with us in programming the annual level of activity for Wellingtonians across the city. It would suit them and it would help them, and it would be a good thing to put them into one group, call them the annual stability grants, and make that decision once a year instead of pepper potting it whenever they choose to apply. That is the fundamental change in the framework from the status quo, and that's what we're asking you to approve today. We understand, and it's just my final concluding remark, is we know that the Living Wage Fund is a separate piece of work that we are commencing in April, which will also come to you in May. Because Danny Webster has commented on this today, I'll just say that we had a very constructive meeting with her too, with a lot of good things about it. Our recollection of that meeting differs because we advised her too they would be interviewed as part of the living wage review, which is going to occur in April, and I will write to Danny to make that clear if it wasn't clear enough to him at the meeting. And secondly, we don't have a view about the living wage, whether it should occur or not. That's your decision. The review will give you those options. What we do think, because the assessors have reported it, is there are some technical difficulties in the fund as it stands at the moment, and we're expecting the review to surface those and propose what could be done. And certainly it's likely we mentioned those two at the time. So in conclusion, thank you to all of you, because I know going on the Grants Committee is actually a labour of love for the arts sector. And the fact that the Council did vote an increase, and the fact that you do care about the living wage, is in the context of a really difficult time for the sector. The fact that most of the self-employed artists earn under $20,000 a year, and those who are employed earn about $39,000. And there is a contraction going on both in rhetoric and in real dollars for the arts sector at central government level as well as across the country, and where philanthropic funds are shifting their focus to social needs. So what the Council does here makes an enormous difference to these organisations, and what we've presented you with is just the way to think about how we're managing our investment and make the choices that will face you in May.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions that have not been answered? Yes.
So I just wonder whether it would be better to have someone who is more closely associated with supporting the living wage to see the paper rather than me.
Sure, if you would like. Sure.
Only because if someone asks me the process and things, I'm just going to
Okay, fair enough. We can do that when we come to debate. Any questions of officers? Have we all thoroughly answered them? Yes, sorry, Neil.
Yeah, what would be, are we allowed to ask, what would be your interpretation of the amended writing in front of you, in terms of the outcome of the red writing on the screen?
We think it's very helpful. We think improving in principle today enables us to start the conversation with the annual stability grant people. We think that clarifying that the living wage is coming back to you in May, obviously there's some confusion about that, so I think that's a very useful thing. And we're very happy, we're already deeply involved in discussion with elements of the sector, and there'll be more coming. We're very happy to, in fact, it's useful to the arts sector to show you that this matters. So the notion of a survey, we support.
Did that answer your question, Councillor? Okay. If there are no further questions, then we'll move to debate. Thank you very much. Okay. I will move the depicted on the screen motion pro forma. Do I have a seconder? Okay, Councillor O'Neill. Yeah, I will speak briefly. I suppose just to detail the reason that this motion has differed from the recommendations. Could I ask officers to leave the table, please? Which is that we understand that the new categories and framework being proposed is necessary to allow our staff to proceed having discussions with the sector and flag how our new process is going to look for those who apply to the fund. The reason, however, that there is a deferral being proposed is that we are yet to find out, due to the out-of-sequence nature of the living wage paper and this paper, how the two fit together. And so for that reason, we're going to defer it, undertake some preparatory work, and then when we next meet as a subcommittee, we will have a more complete picture of how the living wage for non-council events fund fits into this new framework that we are approving in principle today. So that is the purpose of this new motion, and I hope you will support it. Councillor O'Neill, do you wish to speak?
Sure, just to speak really briefly and to acknowledge the mahi of the sector, but also a lot of our officers. I know, in particular in the art space, it is a lot of trust is built on relationships and being able to work with people, and I do actually really support and love the Arts and Culture Fund Review in particular, creating more certainty to support around the frequency of grants and how that's allocated in that area. And just to briefly, speak on the living wage, having led the amendment to the LTP last year and really wanting council to continue its commitment there. So Wellington City Council is one of the first councils in Aotearoa to support the living wage. The leadership, including the Living Wage for Events Fund, has helped set up the standard for fair pay in the Arts and Events Centre within the Wellington region. Big events like Fringe and Kupadupa and Igram, to little things like poetry at Fringe. It's certainly not a negative thing to set a good standard for fair pay. And I think, as evidence from what we've heard at the table this morning, it's also influenced the rest of the arts sector here. If there is a strong case for removing the living wage and events fund and having that discussion, I'm really open to having that conversation properly and helpful. And I really support, the amendments that are being moved pro forma here. If this fund just a stake on the ground, if this fund disappears, event organisers will face a pretty tough choice, either to cut wages or run fewer events, and that's a lose-lose for Wellington. So I am looking forward to the discussions ahead, and genuinely quite excited to hear more from our arts community. Wellington's just been through some fantastic events like Newtown Festival and Fringe, and we've got Kupadupa coming up, and I know at every single one of those launches the acknowledgement was for the Living Wage Events Fund was made, and it is really important for our artists. So just to thank all the folks in the room today for making sure that we have space for that discussion.
Okay, is there any further debate? No, also welcome to the table, Councillor Abdurrahman. All right, in that case, I will use my right of reply simply to thank officers for the preparation of this report, which I think is something that I've neglected to do thus far, and we have maybe not acknowledged enough today. The new framework by which we are to be delivering these grants is very good, and we appreciate the work done to create it. There is a particular concern that this subcommittee has, but I want to make it clear that that does not diminish the quality and indeed necessity of the other aspects of ahotini and operational matters that have gone into forming this review, so thank you. All right, let's move to a vote. Kwa mana. All right, that brings me to the end of my agenda. If there is nothing else, I'd ask you to join me in a karakia if you wish to close the meeting. Inihia, ki te uru tapu nui, kia wātea, kia mama, te ngākau, te tinana, te wairua I te arataka. Ko ia rā e rongo e whakaire ake ki runga, kia wātea, aira, kua wātea. Thank you, everyone.